Yeah.
I'm not sure if Paula's going to be here or not. So,
Yeah.
how's it going up in up in your neck of the woods?
Good. My mom is visiting. She got in on Friday, and we spent the day outside yesterday because it's gorgeous here. We got up into like the 60s, and
Oh,
and uh
nice,
and the sky is so clear, so everybody's
nice.
taking advantage of it. Everybody was everywhere, like swarming the parks. So
Yeah. Oh wow. I just realized the total eclipse is coming, and we have plans to go out to see that.
where are you
So
gonna go see it?
St. Louis. I mean, St. Louis is the closest city that we're going to drive to a
We're
smaller
actually
area. Go ahead.
we have a plan to go to Bloomington
Hmm.
to see it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we planned it a while ago.
Yeah. So we're actually gonna have to we're not staying. I mean, everything was booked. Like, I mean, this is and I don't know, this is probably 8 months ago.
Yeah.
Everything, I mean, it was already people were already, little obscure Airbnbs were already being swallowed
Yeah.
up. So anyway, I'm looking forward to it. Good morning, Miriam. Just realized I don't have a chat enabled here, so let me try to get that going. Sorry about that. There we go. Yeah, so we're in the process of actually we've kind of put looking for houses on hold for the moment. So we're
Yeah.
um it's just kind of nuts right now.
Right. I understand.
But
Uh,
how's Kira doing?
she's great.
Hmm.
Potty training is on the upswing. Um,
Super.
which is fun. She's very happy to have grandma here. So yeah, good good time. Oh, there
Yeah.
goes Rob. My mom was telling me about like reporting because obviously I haven't been in Huntsville in a while, but my mom was
Hmm.
talking about like all these crazy like condo towers and stuff that they've been building around where we
Oh,
were living. We live up
yeah.
on Chapman Mountain.
Yeah, it's nuts. There's a lot of development going on. The area um I mean, you can definitely see the gentrification or the swing going on in areas that didn't used to be popular.
Yeah,
Have some really big developments going up. Um, but I don't. Part of it's Huntsville, and part of it's the housing crisis. It's just
right.
things are so unaffordable um, for lots of
Yeah,
people. Um,
we've definitely
but
got that going on up here too. So
Oh, right, right. Probably no comparison, honestly. I mean, where you guys are, um, West Coast, but Huntsville, I guess, they came out like some magazine said it was the best place to live or whatever, and so,
there's a lot of
which
new
is
companies opening up down there. So
yeah, yeah, a lot of job growth. I think they said there's something like this may be wrong. Well, I don't know. I'm not gonna throw a number because it'll be wrong. Thousands and thousands of, unfilled job vacancies. So
wow.
lots of demand. Good morning, Rob.
Yeah.
Good morning. Where is that?
Huntsville.
Oh, wow.
Just talking about it's hard to place. It's very expensive right there. But anyway, it's good to see you. I don't know. We may be it today. I don't know. I know Tony's driving or Tony's flying, and I haven't heard from Paula. So, oh, there's Paula.
Paula.
Good morning, Paula. Good morning, Paula.
Oh, good morning. I've
Ah,
got my volume's too high.
I'm sorry. Also, I'm loud because I'm a preacher.
Uh,
One of the job criteria.
Yeah, yeah. Well, welcome. Sorry I didn't reply to your text, Paula. This has been a crazy week. My bad.
Not a
Uh,
problem. It's been a crazy week here too.
yeah. Um, well, I tell you what, uh let's go ahead and pull up the liturgy. Let's see. Paula, would you mind being the liturgist?
Not at all.
And Miller, can you be the voice of the people?
Sure.
And Rob, would you do the gospel reading?
Sure thing.
I will do the Hebrew Bible reading. Okay. So, whoops. Let's try this again. So I will pull up the liturgy and we can get started.
St. Patrick died on this day in either 457 or 493. Records disagree. As a young boy, he was captured and enslaved by Irish raiders, but escaped and later returned to Ireland on a mission to spread Christianity. Although he is often credited with bringing Christianity to Ireland, he was simply its most successful missionary. Contrary to internet memes painting him as an inquisitor, Patrick writes that his mission was respectful toward his pagan host and often involved him paying them for protection. St. Columba and Brigid are two other saints that developed a uniquely Irish Christianity that fused elements of Celtic practice, Christian theology. St. Columba even referred to Christ, my druid. Today is also the feast day of Joseph of Arimathea, who paid for Jesus' tomb. Later legends about him feature the Holy Grail. Today is the birthday in 1912 of Bayard Rustin, a leader in the movement for civil rights, pacifism, and gay rights. Because of his sexual orientation and involvement with socialism, his leadership in the civil rights movement was downplayed by news media and historians. Although he died in 1987, President Obama awarded him a posthumous Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2013. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Hear these words of invitation.
The hospitality of God knows no bounds.
The love of God is immeasurable.
The generosity of God is beyond our wildest dreams.
We gather today as invited ones,
As beloved ones,
as blessed ones.
draw near and let us break the bread of life.
The reading is from Psalms 51, 1 through 6. Have mercy on me, God, according to your faithful love.
Wipe away my wrongdoings, according to your great compassion.
Wash me completely clean of my guilt. Purify me from my sin.
Because I know my wrongdoings, my sin is always right in front of me.
I've sinned against you, you alone. I've committed evil in your sight.
That's why you are justified when you render your verdict, completely correct when you issue your judgment.
Yes, I was born in guilt and sin from the moment my mother conceived me.
And yes, you want truth in the most hidden places. You teach me wisdom in the most secret space.
Our Hebrew Bible reading comes from Jeremiah 31. The time is coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the people of Israel and Judah. It won't be like the covenant I made with their ancestors when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. They broke that covenant with me, even though I was their husband, declares the Lord. No, this is the covenant that I will make with the people of Israel after that time, declares the Lord. I will put my instructions within them and engrave them on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. They will no longer need to teach each other to say, know the Lord, because they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their wrongdoing and never again remember their sins.
The gospel reading comes from John chapter 12. Some Greeks were among those who had come up to worship at the festival. They came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, and made a request. "Sir, we want to see Jesus." Philip told Andrew, and Andrew and Philip told Jesus. Jesus replied, "The time has come for the human one to be glorified. I assure you that unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it can only be a single seed. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Those who love their lives will lose them, and those who hate their lives in this world will keep them forever. Whoever serves me must follow me. Wherever I am, there my servant will also be. My Father will honor whoever serves me. Now I am deeply troubled. What should I say? Father, save me from this time? No, for this is the reason I have come to this time. Father, glorify your name." Then a voice came from heaven. "I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again." The crowd standing there heard and said, "It's thunder." Others said, "An angel spoke to him." Jesus replied, "This voice wasn't for my benefit, but for yours. Now is the time for judgment of this world. Now this world's ruler will be thrown out. When I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw everyone to me." He said this to show how he was going to die. May God
May,
bless the hearing of this word.
Thanks be to God.
in his Confessions, St. Patrick writes, "You all know, and God knows, how I have lived among you since my youth in true faith and in sincerity of heart. Towards the pagan people, too, among whom I live, I have lived in good faith and will continue to do so. God knows that I have not been devious with even one of them, nor do I think of doing so for the sake of God and his church. I would not want to arouse persecution of them and of all of us, nor would I want that the Lord's name should be blasphemed on account of me, since it is written, 'Woe to the one through whom the name of the Lord is blasphemed.'"
So thank you all for getting us started with worship today. We'll continue worship with prayer. I'll get us started. And those of you who are watching, if you're on Zoom, of course, you can simply put your prayer request in the chat. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, feel free to put a prayer request in the comments. I'll keep an eye on YouTube. Would someone keep an eye on Facebook for us?
I've got Facebook up.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's go to God in prayer. God of the universe, the immensity of your creation appeared to Julian of Norwich as a small hazelnut that you were holding in the palm of your hand. Even though the world seems very big to us, the universe and its size, our brains are preoccupied with scale. We think that big things are more important and small things less important. And all things are beautiful, alive, and precious. We ask God that you remind us not to be impressed with scale or dismissive of things that are small. In the same way with people, God, status has no importance to you. Help us to see the image of God stamped upon all of creation and upon those close to us and those far from us. Because of our perception, God, things that are far away also seem less important or not as salient. We ask you, God, to make the death of people in Gaza as important to us as deaths of our families, that we would not regard the suffering of any human being as inconsequential. We ask you also, God, to attend to the issues in our own lives. Sometimes we feel like you must be too big, too important to care about our small concerns. And yet you ask us to bring even our smallest concerns to you, to lift them up, because nothing escapes your notice. So we lift to you ourselves and our situation, context, our whole world, even the situations which seem too big for us to manage or have any influence over, because you ask us to do all these things in prayer. I invite those of you who are listening to share your prayer concerns also.
Vicky,
Prayer.
Lord,
Lord,
hear our
hear
prayer.
our prayer.
Prayers for Chris's mom and dad.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Prayers for Ruth Weaver, David Perucci, and Zaida and Roberto Angeles.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Prayers for Karen, her dad, and her family.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For wisdom.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Students at midterms or on spring break.
Lord, hear our prayer. For the family of next Benedict. Lord, hear our prayer.
For Merle Ayers.
Lord, hear our prayer. For Rob's parents as they travel. Lord, hear our prayer.
Gemma Mullins.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For Rachel as she travels.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For
For
Yana.
this,
Lord, hear our prayer.
for this contentious political season.
Lord, hear our prayer.
God, for all these prayers that we've spoken out loud and for the prayers that we don't know how to put into words, we give you thanks that you beckon us to pray and that you answer in your way. And we also pray the prayer that Jesus taught us. Holy One, our Mother and Father, let your name be revered. Let your reign come. Let your will be done on earth as it is in the heavens. Give us today the bread we need for today, and forgive our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial, and deliver us from evil. For yours is the sovereignty, the power, and the glory, now and forever. Amen. So I want to start off today just in a way because I can't not address it. Whenever I hear a Hebrew Bible reading or I hear something that Paul said used to support the doctrine of original sin. So I want to talk just a little bit about original sin because in a way I do believe in original sin, but in another way I very much do not. When we talk about one of the ways that I heard a theologian describe original sin was the sin that meets us at our origin. In other words, the stuff that we're caught in that we can't escape. And the fact is, most of us, whether we're progressive or conservative, recognize that there's a lot of stuff that we're caught up in that's just a system. Like we have no control over. I, at least not entirely, right? Kind of like addiction. Addiction is not something that you really can blame someone for, but it's something that you have to take responsibility for if you're going to get well. And that's the way I think of original sin. White supremacy is original sin. I mean, let's just put that on the table. That's clearly something that I didn't choose to experience. I didn't choose to buy into, and yet at the same time, it's part of a system that I'm part of. The damage that we do to the planet is a system. I don't know how to extract myself from a fossil fuel economy, right? I mean, my choice is to die, to opt out and not eat, right? Because I'm not growing all my own food. If I buy food that I can afford, it's going to be shipped from all over the world using fossil fuels, both to grow it and to ship it and to bring it to my door wrapped in plastic, right? I have no choice, not a reasonable choice, right, to extract myself from those systems. So in that sense, I think original sin is something, that it does exist. But the idea that you are born evil was an innovation. It was a theological innovation created by Augustine, and I even honestly think it's an unfair reading of Augustine to read it too literally. But the idea was there's a sinful taint in the human species, that we tend toward darkness or tend toward wickedness. It's been described as a curvature of the soul. In other words, we tend to just veer off course. Back in the medieval time, it was actually understood that sin was inherited. Pardon me for this. This is just the way it is. That it was inherited through semen. That's part of why Jesus had to be born of a virgin, because to separate him from this, the seed of sin, he had to be born of a Virgin Mary, right? So, like, I want you to understand, this is hogwash, but this is the way people thought about it, right? They had to have some way to think, oh, how is sin transmitted from one person to other? And how is that fair? Well, that's not really fair. It's just the way it is. It's transmitted as if you're born, through the seed, it's the seed is messed up.
So
So
we can blame all sin on men.
basically, yeah. Basically, it's the Y chromosome. That's the
But
problem.
somehow it was still Eve's fault. Don't forget that.
Well, yeah, exactly. So the point being, I think the idea of original sin is true in some ways and not in others. This prayer, especially though, I want to draw your attention because this often gets used to justify the concept of original sin. I'm going to pull it back up on the screen just for a minute. This is someone who's praying for forgiveness, right? Who's probably feels guilty, David, is ostensibly David, probably not, but the author is often attributed to David, is saying, I have really messed up, and I realize I am guilty of wrongdoing, and it doesn't actually get into the specifics, but it's just sort of general. My wrongdoing, my sin is always right in front of me. Something's reminding this person of what a wretched sinner they are, and says, I've sinned against you alone. Right? Now, again, if this is David and it's the whole Bathsheba thing, his sin is in front of a lot of people, right? He sinned against tons of people. But this is an author. I don't think it's David. This author is saying, you, God, you're the one I've upset, right? I've committed evil in your sight, You're completely right to convict me. This is a contrite person, right? And then the author says this, yes, I was born in guilt, in sin, from the moment my mother conceived me. This is where okay, there it is. It's the seed, right? This is poetic language. This is someone who's very contrite, and when I'm apologizing to someone, when I've done something wrong, let's say that I've done something to offend my wife, I will wallow in my guilt, right? I will say something like, I am such a piece of crap. I mean, I will say bad things about myself. I am utterly worthless, right? Because I feel that way. Not this, I'm like, oh, poor me, self-pity, right? This is the idea is when you are contrite, you feel this big. Have you ever felt that way? Right? I mean, this is the thing, like it bothers me when we take poetic language and we turn it into theology. This is meant to be poetic language. I feel this small. I wish I wish the floor would open up and swallow me. I want to die. This is the language people use when they talk about feeling bad. I am so embarrassed I could die. Right? I am utterly worthless. This is poetic language. It's human language. It is a real feeling. But I want to point out to you, and I have to do this in counseling all the time. All right. That is a real feeling. It is a legitimate feeling, and it is not true. And I think if God were to sit the author of the Psalm down, I have to think God would say, I know you feel really bad, and sometimes when we do wrong things, we feel bad. But it is not true that you are worthless. Right? That's what God would say. That would be God's language to the author. You know it, right? And it is not that you are a ridiculous, dismal, awful human being and deserve to die and that Jesus dies in your place. See, that is dysfunctional thinking. That is the kind of thing that probably 40 to 50% of the time when I'm doing mental health counseling, I'm trying to correct with people because they feel worthless. And I don't think that should be what our theology is based on. Our theology shouldn't be based on a metaphorical reading of my worst feelings. And unfortunately, that's what we've got. That's what we've inherited, which I will say, that also makes me think that there's something to original sin because we've inherited this baloney idea that people are worthless. And it's been taught to us, and we've even promulgated it in the Christian church, which is an institution that I'm part of, right? That's part of original sin, that we make people feel worthless. And then it becomes weaponized and targeted against specific groups of people, right? Especially people, of different sexual orientations or gender identities or ethnic groups or national origin. We weaponize it. Oh yeah, well, we're all sinners. These people a little bit more than me, but we're all sinners because we're all worthless. And that is really that is a key theological problem with Christianity. Now, I think in many ways what we've seen over the last, actually there's always been a thread of resistance to that going way back. Origin, when I say origin, I don't mean Origin, but Origen, who's a person who was an early church saint. Actually, I think he was declared a heretic, but he talked about original blessing, that we are all made in the image of God, and there's original goodness to go along with original sin. John Wesley, by the way, also, founder of Methodism, although he believed in original sin, and he talked about pervasive sin, he didn't use the word total depravity like his Calvinist brethren and sistren. He also believed that original sin did not wipe away the essential goodness of the image of God. It kind of smears it or mars it. It's kind of like a dirty mirror, but it does not erase the fundamental goodness that is present in human beings. So sin warps, but it doesn't destroy. That was his theology. And I think that's a corrective. I think that's a better idea than total depravity, or that we are somehow sinful from our conception. So all of that brings me to the two verses, the other two scriptures that we have today. The first one in Jeremiah, where God says, I'm going to change the way I work with these people. Now, again, I want you to understand, God's saying, that God is changing in this verse. I'm going to make a new covenant. I'm no longer going to do this. I'm going to write this covenant on their hearts, right? But this is really a change in theological understanding that Jeremiah is saying God is in the process of perfecting us, that God is going to engrave God's instructions on our hearts. We're going to know them internally. And it's no longer going to be the case that some people are prophets or holy people and they teach others about God. Because look, this is stuff that's written on our souls. This is stuff that we have that's intrinsic to us. And I want to share that this is also something that I've encountered a lot as I've talked with people in the psychedelic community about the idea of remembering things, right? And there's sort of an Eastern understanding, a Hindu and indigenous African and Native American thread of spirituality, which says we're not learning things, we're remembering them. This is also kind of Plato's idea, right? You're actually remembering things that your soul already knows. There's a thread of that here in the scriptures. The idea that there is something intrinsic in us that resonates with who God is. Like you know this in your bones when you hear it, when you perceive it, that something goes, oh yeah, that's the way God is. My theology is that that's what Jesus came to do. That the people who Christ said, oh yeah, that's the way God's supposed to be. Other people have said that the real revelation of Christianity is not that Jesus is like God, but God is like Jesus. That when we encounter Jesus, we're like, oh yes, obviously, this is a God who's going to sit down across from us and say, you are not born wicked. I made you good, right? I know you may feel this big. I know you may feel like everything's ruined, but the fact is, I love you, and I'm in the process of transforming you into someone who's exceptional, someone who reflects my character. That's who God is, and that's the God we encounter in Jesus Christ. So that brings me to the New Testament story. Some Greeks. Now these are Jews, but they've been Greekified. They speak Greek. They've forgotten Hebrew. They really want to encounter this Jesus. They want to come and get to know this Jesus character. And Jesus is aware that people who are more and more on the fringes, people who are not mainline Jews who speak Hebrew and Aramaic, but that people who just don't have much connection to their Jewish roots at all are wanting to get to know him. He's like, it's happening. The thing that I thought was going to happen is beginning to happen. The Gentiles, eventually people more and more on the margins are going to want to get to know who Christ is. And he goes into this speech, which sounds weird unless you understand kind of Jesus's perspective. He says, okay, the time has come for me to be glorified. I'm about to be lifted up. And I'm a little nervous about this whole thing. But this is what's going to happen. And boom, God's voice from the heavens. I have glorified it. I'll glorify it again. And Jesus says, all right, that's for you guys. That's for your benefit. I'm about to disappear. I'm about to die. And what's going to happen is God's going to bust the doors of this thing wide open. This isn't any longer going to be a little Jewish movement of small group, profound experience. This is going to break through the Jewish crowd. Whoops. Didn't want to knock over my coffee. Break through the Jewish group and into the Gentile crowd, and those people are going to want to get to know me because God's already written on their hearts. They're made in the image of God too. They're going to resonate with this image. They're going to remember what they already know. That this is something, this movement is, this movement that Jesus is talking about is going back to something written on people's hearts, stamped on them from the beginning. That is not wickedness, but original goodness, original blessing. And that Jesus is going to lift that out of people by being raised up. Okay, so that's my read on these three different scriptures that we have in our lectionary today. I realize this is just lectionary text, but I see the thread there that this is not about original sin. This is not about our division. from God. It's about our existential unity in God. So I'm done. Responses?
I feel like the idea that someone is just inherently bad, is it's a wonderful tool if you want them to feel lower than you.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the power dynamics of saying, you all are your righteousness is as filthy rags, and
Hmm.
you are worthless, so you better listen to what I say. Like whoever has tried to tell you. I mean, it like when you said it's. I think you said stamped from the something that you
Yeah.
said reminded me of the title "Stamped from the Beginning," which
Stamped
was
from the
used.
beginning. Yes. I use that intentionally. Uh, um, Abraham Kendi book. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. It was. I mean, they were saying that about black people.
Yeah.
They're less
Right.
than. So I think I would rather think about the relationship with God as something more like in the Bluey episode Stickbird.
I'm sorry,
Which
you cut out. I missed that last thing you said.
I would rather think of God as something from the Bluey episode Stickbird,
Okay.
where the essentially the children teach the dad something, you
Mm,
know it's not this top down relationship of like, a lot of the episodes are the parents trying to teach the kids how to
yeah.
be humans, and obviously parenting is that, but sometimes the children come back and they have something that they want to say, and the parent is like, oh wow, you're right. So I like to
Yeah.
think about our relationship with God that way too. It's more of a conversation. There's certainly a lot of conversations with God in the Bible. So
Yes. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. No, I think so. I haven't. I'm not as familiar with Bluey because I'm out of the children's TV game these days. But definitely, I do.
It's appropriate for adults. You should just go for it.
I've heard you say that. I need to look it up. I do. Is it
kind of
what is it?
therapeutic.
What's it on?
Oh, Disney Plus is what
Okay.
we watch on.
Okay. Yeah. 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 Man. Yes. No, I do think it's more supposed to be more of a conversation. And I mean the whole idea is that God wants a kind of spiritual maturity. I mean, I one of my favorite passages in John is just two chapters after this one where Jesus says, "I no longer call you servants. Now I call you friends." Like the whole idea is I don't want servants. I want friends. I mean, I'm thinking about my own life. I mean, of course, I do consider the state of my house, and I do think it would be nice to have servants sometimes. But really, what I want in my life are friends, right? I don't want servants. Anyway,
It's the same with your children.
yeah.
When you're raising them, you're trying to instill that right and wrong and a conscience in them, but you don't want to be that authority figure when they're 30 and 40 years old. You want them to relate to you as a friend instead of a
Hmm.
minion.
Yes. I mean, yeah, yeah. I, I have a friend who came up with this, talks about parenting, a fellow counselor who talks about, first you're a cop, then you're a coach, and then you become a consultant. And he usually uses this as a way of like saying you're always auditioning for the next role. Like when you're a cop, you're already auditioning for the role of coach. If you're a bad cop, your kids aren't going to want you as a coach, right? If you just bring the hammer down all the time. And likewise, when you're a coach in their teenage years, when they're adults, you want to be a consultant, right? But you're auditioning for that role. If you're still being a cop, you're not going to get to be the consultant. They're going to cut you off. And which I love that analogy. And I feel the same is true with God. When we look through the Bible, you see that evolution, from cop to coach. Well, I won't say God's a consultant, but you know what I'm saying. It's like the idea is that there's a developing relationship from sort of this infantile uh, religion to something that is more mature.
Well, I think the goal isn't to control them. Uh, you want them to move from seeing you as a cop
Hmm.
to making those decisions simply because it's written on their heart as to how life should be lived.
Yeah, right. It's a moral development or spiritual development perspective. Absolutely. Yeah.
So You're when you talk about, not wanting servants but wanting friends, I thought of, the idea of staff, the idea of help, right?
Hmm.
And suddenly, so I don't know. I've just had a little journey in my head thinking about the movie Behind the Candelabra. Um, so really terrific movie. Michael Douglas playing Liberace. Now this is based on a memoir, so I mean, it's been dramatized, right? So like, you can't necessarily take it all at face value. It's one person's version of events, but it occurs to me that this movie actually, perhaps unintentionally, offers a really interesting meditation using this, very significant pop cultural figure from the 20th century, to inquire into the nature of divinity and our attitudes toward it.
Mm.
Um, because, well, when you talk about wanting friends, it did occur to me how impoverished in the movie Liberace seems to be of friends, and there's a great scene of like Michael Douglas walking through his palatial house alone. It's in a decrepit condition. There's dog turds on the floor because nobody's letting the dogs out, and he's just staggering around in a bathrobe, and it's like, that's God, right? In
Mm.
in the minds of some people,
Yeah.
that's God, or that could be God, right? Like, I mean, or that's God. That's what God doesn't want. God doesn't want to be Liberace tripping over dog turds. God would like to have friends,
Yeah.
you know. And I mean, so then this is where it shades into people's attitudes toward divinity, because of course Liberace is an entertainer. People go to be impressed. They go for the glitz and the glam, right? The production value. This is sort of like mega church smoke machines territory now,
Yeah.
right? This is
Yeah.
about spectacle. And movie, Liberace, so he's got a boyfriend that he ultimately wants to have plastic surgery to look more like Liberace. And I'm thinking about all the times I've heard people pray, "Oh Lord, reduce me so that you may increase," right? And it's like,
Yeah.
that's creepy.
Yeah.
Like, no, so you're pointing about the idea that Jesus comes to show us who God is, right? I
Hmm.
think is sort of a key to unlocking God's desire for infinite diversity and infinite combination,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
That the way that we want to be like Jesus isn't a way that actually reduces us. It's a way that vivifies us, right?
Yeah.
It's a template for being fully human, not for just following a script of like, so I'm going to dress this way and eat these things, and who's going to nail me on a cross? It's 12:30. It's getting
Yeah.
late.
Right.
Like, there's this really simplistic idea to me of the like the mimicry of Christ is somehow supposed to be about erasing ourselves.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, that doesn't seem right. That doesn't
Yeah.
seem like what God is after at all.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Yeah. I don't know how often I've heard, yeah, less of me, more of you. Um, and I do recognize there's sort of a mystical, excuse me, a mystical aspect of that, like, ego death and whatever. I wanted to die to my false self, but somehow I find that I'm more myself when when God has more for me, right? So it's not like a double bucket where I get less so God can get more. It's like this, right?
Yeah.
It's not like this. Anyway, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, Paula, go ahead.
Along that line, I have heard so many people pray or express the idea that a relationship with Jesus is supposed to make them more divine.
Mm,
I think it makes them more human. I
hmm.
think Jesus came to teach us how humans should live. And the more we allow that influence into our life, the more human we become. And that's where that abundant life comes in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think so, and I think that goes along with sort of the Christology. I think it was Roberta Bondi who first I heard her say we don't have a double bucket, like the idea that when Jesus is less human, like in this passage he's more divine and less human. In this passage he's more human and less divine. Like it's this is that it is like when he is at his most human is when he is at his most divine. Like on the cross, when he's suffering and dying, like he's most divine. I mean that's the idea, or whenever you see that, like when he's in weakness, when he's struggling, that's when you see God really shining through. But that, we tend to think of it like this, like divine, if the divine's higher, the humans, that they're in opposition somehow. Yeah.
So in that vein, something else that struck me when you were talking about the transmission of original sin. And I mean, obviously this is all like using these categories that are very concerned about contamination and purity and infection, right? You can even, I mean, it kind of invokes the idea of like blood libel, right? Like,
right.
So it is interesting. I mean, I don't know. I've thought for years how peculiar it is. You hear people talk about salvation, and in such a tangible way, like something on a grocery list, but and so I've referred to it before as soup can theology, where it's sort of like, like if you're doomsday prepping or whatever, like you've got this can of soup in there. This is, I've got my salvation on the shelf next to my, water purification tablets and my 50-gallon drum of freeze-dried macaroni and cheese. So I'm good. Like, and just the crazy tangibility of that, like it's so concrete, and you can hear that concreteness when people talk about things like, oh, can you lose your salvation? Like, what did you misplace your soup can?
Right.
Yeah. And so I'm suddenly seeing the connection between that tangibility and this very tangible idea of the transmission of sin, right? It's almost like it's soup. Like I'm going past soup can now. It's more like vaccination theology. Like this original sin is this contamination, this infection, and we get vaccinated in order to deal with it, right? And so, can that vaccination wear off? Do you have to get a booster? Like, people, this is now the territory people are in, right? So anyway, I don't know. I was very, very struck by that, like how weirdly concrete that imagery is, and it makes me wonder. I don't know. I see that mindset in force today with a lot of ramifications today, and so it made me want to sort of look directly at it and talk about alternatives to that mindset.
Yeah. Right. I think, I mean, part of it is we're always dealing with metaphor, so there's always going to be, inaccuracies in the metaphor. Your description of salvation is like something that you have. As you were saying that, I was thinking it's interesting because we don't talk about health. Well, I mean, except we do talk about health the same way, right?
At least I have my health.
Yeah. But we'll speak about it almost in an unfortunate way, right? I mean, health is a process. Like you're gonna die eventually. So, health is a process of, I was thinking if you get a cut, I've used this analogy with people before too. So like you fall and you're on your bike, you fall and you land in gravel and you got little bits of gravel stuck in your knee and you have to pick those bits of gravel out before you can heal properly, right? So the process of being healed can sometimes be painful. Like I think about this as like trauma. I have to go address things. I have to we have to debride the damage. Now we can put maggots and things and eat the dead flesh. And I'm Rob out now because he's so expressive. But you think about like the health metaphor is, I mean, it isn't something like, oh, I've either got it or I don't, or it's a process. And I do think salvation, which means healing, that's a process. And so much of what we want to do is kind of like rubber stamp it. Like you said, you got your salvation or you don't. Well, if it's a process, then someone says, are you saved? I don't say yes or no. I say I am today, or I say, yes, it's happening. I'm being saved. And that's really the mature version of Christianity. We're part of a being saved community, right? We are being saved. Am I saved? Well, there's still a lot of crap going on, right? Not quite yet, but we're getting there. Anyway, yeah, go ahead, Paula.
I think it all ties back into what we were talking about last week, too, about facing our fears in order to heal.
Mm,
That passage from Psalms ended by where he's pleading with God, whoever he may be, saying, teach me truth in my hidden places, in the
yeah,
dark places in my life. So that healing comes slowly as we face those dark places, admit them, and start to live out that truth. Um, and that we are being saved. Back in Genesis, when God curses humans, did I lose you?
you're still
No.
here. You got
Okay.
you got, but
And
I've still got you.
he tells Eve and Adam that if they eat of that tree, they will die. In
Hmm.
the Hebrew verb form, it's not you will die, period. It's
Ah,
will die. You are going to start. My computer's acting wonky
Yeah,
today,
you just
but
froze.
it's dying, you will die,
hmm.
which you're already dying, but you're going to continue to die for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
And I think that salvation thing is similar. You are saved, but you are going to continue to be saved. What is that? Sanctification.
yeah, yeah.
um, the rest of your life,
Hmm.
if you allow God to continue to work in you.
Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
it makes me think about it as a potential metaphor just for being like, if you do this, you're going to make your life so hard.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's the kind of thing that you would say to a child, like, ultimately, it's your decision. I really hope you'll choose something different, right? I mean, that's the that's the kind of place you are when kids are going out on their own or when they're maturing. And I'm really glad, Paula, you brought up the that part, teach me wisdom in the secret places. I'm glad you brought that because I meant to say something about because I do feel like that's the parallel, right? It's I was I was conceived in wickedness, but you teach me wisdom in the secret places. Like the whole idea is I'm rotten to the core, teach me wisdom in the core. Like get down to the gritty stuff, right? Um, that's part of that psalm too. And somehow we like zip right past that on the way to creating a concretized theology out of this metaphor, right? Anyway.
I think the older you
Uh,
get, the more you start to appreciate the Psalms. I
Hmm.
remember when I was younger, I just couldn't understand all the agony of some of them. Um,
Yeah.
and you gravitate toward the happy, happy, God is great ones. Uh, the older you get and the more of life you experience, though, you start to grapple with those issues
Hmm.
and become more aware that you have secret places that need to be cleaned up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I think you're right. Go ahead, Miller.
I kind of like the idea of thinking about the whole secret places thing is sort of like, what are like, let's get down to the basic assumptions that are causing you to harm other people.
Mm.
I think about like, you know, uh, it, a lot of people think of like they sort of marry the idea of like fatness with villainy, and if you watch a bunch of movies, like even Dune 2, which was a good
Hmm.
movie, Baron Harkonnen is extremely fat and extremely evil. But like, why do we do that?
Hmm.
Why do we think about that? And like, it's because you're trying to think less of fat people.
Right. Yeah.
There's this like this ranking of people who are different from you. And spoiler, I read this. I don't know how. I think it's true, but apparently, Frank Herbert was extremely homophobic and
Yeah.
kept his gay son from seeing his dead mother, his dying mother. Um, And so in the book, Baron Harkonnen is very gay coded. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so like there's these basic assumptions that sort of, meld together to create, harm in the world. So I mean, asking God and the divine to sort of look inside me and find these, where did I go wrong? What's
Mm.
this? What's the harm that I'm causing, and where is it originating from?
Right. Or I also think
What
about,
have I been taught that I haven't realized is wrong yet?
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I think about like again, just because these days I'm doing therapy most of the week. I mean, I think about the fact that it's hard. Like there's stuff that you're going to be uncomfortable looking at. I'm sorry, but we're gonna have to go there, and that's I think you're right. I mean, the part of it's like, okay, Frank, I like if we could sit him down and say, let's talk about your problems because you got some problems with your son that are probably your problems, not his problems. I mean, that would be going to the deep places, right? This is really about your mother, Frank, or something.
It's
I mean,
always about the mother.
I know, no, right,
Toxic masculinity and generational trauma,
right, right. Yeah, I was really going more less of a Freudian way, more of a social justice way, but
And those assumptions are taught so subliminally
mhm.
that we have no idea what we're learning. I am one
Yeah,
of the world's biggest Harry Potter fans,
hmm
but it drives me crazy to watch the movies because all the evil people are ugly. And
mm,
in the books, Hermione is ugly. She's got
hmm
huge buck teeth and horrible hair. But Hollywood or whoever made Harry Potter took all of these good characters and made them beautiful, except for Dobby. But
hmm
we our kids are soaking stuff like that in the Disney movies. The
yeah.
princesses are always beautiful, except for Shrek's princess. But it just gets
See,
pounded
there's
in
fat
us.
phobia in that.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, it just gets pounded into us though from the day we're born.
right, right. Well, I mean, yeah,
Obligatory acknowledgement that J.K. Rowling is a disgusting turf.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, talk about somebody with some basic assumptions that are wrong.
yeah. Well, right. I mean, good parallel for Frank Herbert then. I mean, it really is. I mean, lookism is something that plays into how we think about good and evil. Like, yeah, pretty things are good. I mean, and I do think there's something about our experience of beauty which helps connect us to the divine. But part of maturity is recognizing there are a lot of things that are beautiful, not just one or two things. To that process of maturing is a process of looking at things and going, oh, um, Elaine Scarry wrote a book called On Beauty and Being Just, which I often come back to because she's got this beautiful metaphor about how for a long time she thought palm trees were ugly. Like she just didn't like palm trees and she didn't see why, was it Matisse that painted so many palm trees until one day she realized she was wrong. And so her first chapter is on beauty and being wrong. And the whole idea is like, oh, and that experience is then one that you want to replicate other places. Like now I've had this insight or I've had this change of perspective and I want to reproduce that, right? And that's beauty is often our first intimation of what justice is when we go, oh, I was wrong about something. Anyway, I don't know who's next, Paul or Rob, whoever.
Oh, I didn't
Good to
even know
go.
mine was still up, so it's
Okay.
Rob.
Miller and I were having a conversation about sort of the aesthetic underpinnings of authoritarianism
hmm
versus alternatives, and it like what you were just saying. It really struck me that I think the appreciation for a diverse beauty, right?
hmm
The appreciation for lots of different things as they are in their uniqueness, their intricacy, their specialness, right? um, is sort of counter to that whole mindset.
Mhm.
You know, like there are people who think slugs are gross,
Mhm.
and then there are people who think slugs are fascinating and cool and cute and
Mhm.
and sort of moral exemplars in a way because of their extraordinary sort of gender transcending reality. It's like, well, if
Mhm.
slugs can get away from a binary, right? So there's this. It feels like the intense conformity that undergirds the authoritarian mind, and that's not just political, that's theological too, right?
Yeah.
It goes back to this idea of there being one ideal, and that ideal is a script,
Mhm.
right? You can actually see this reflected again in that idea of like, oh, make me less and make you more,
Yeah.
right? I only
Right.
want to look like Jesus. I don't want to look like what I look like when I'm acting like Jesus. I just
Mhm.
want to look like Jesus,
Yeah.
right? So you can see people shoehorning themselves into this mindset that there is exactly one very specific ideal. And thus, I mean, white supremacy and toxic masculinity and patriarchy and everything,
Mhm.
rather than the appreciation for just, oh, isn't this cool? Isn't this neat?
Mhm.
Right? Isn't it remarkable that?
Yeah.
Um, if we can stop thinking that we're trying to uphold one way to be,
Mhm.
it seems like that would be very freeing.
Yeah. It strikes me as you were saying that um I think I think the kind of original sin I do believe in is incuriosity. Like for someone to be incurious, to me that's the sin, right?
I have a hard time believing that could ever be original, though.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
know,
Well,
if you've ever like known a baby,
right. Yeah, babies are curious about everything, right? You have to learn to be incurious. But
So it's the
that's
sin that is
You may get
imposed at
it,
our origin as they start trying to teach us to be incurious, right?
and
And to
right.
stop appreciating things.
and
Yeah.
it's easy to get curiosity knocked out of you too
Yeah.
as you're growing up and not be rewarded for wanting to learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Teresa just
No,
said, go ahead.
I really liked Teresa's comment. The fascists have the outfits, but the communists have the music. Oh, it's great. Um, well, we're drawing up on the end of the hour. I really appreciate the rich conversation, and as always, thank you all for joining us. Oh, that's they might be giants. Lyric figures. I'll, whoops! Oh, I just lost the screen. So the problem with hot corners is that when I drag the cursor down, everything disappears and then you'll go away. Okay, let's try this again. Okay. I was going to share the liturgy back up on the screen. Here we go.
Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ on my right, Christ on my left. When I lay down, when I lie down, Christ when I sit down, Christ in the heart of everyone who thinks of me, Christ in the mouth of everyone who speaks of me, Christ in the eye that sees me, Christ in the ear that hears me. I arise today through a mighty strength, the invocation of the Trinity, through a belief in the threeness, through a confession of the oneness of the Creator of creation. Amen.
God is love. Nothing is wasted. All things shall be well. Go in peace.
Amen.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for a wonderful conversation. Thanks for being here. I want to remind you this evening at 6:30 on Zoom, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the last of our Christian mysticism small group. I'm doing Julian of Norwich and Hildegard of Bingen. So I'm going to talk about two of my favorite mystic women, medieval mystic women. So if y'all want to join us at 6:30 on Zoom, it's in the email. Hope you guys have a rest of a good Sunday. Those of you on Zoom, stick around for just a minute more.